In the poem Feathers by Mckay, it shows the evolution of habits and how through the repetition of these habits we become numb to how they have impacted us and therefore cannot enhance them or alter them to suit our own needs. For instance, in this poem, the structure is repeated throughout the whole four stanzas, where there is no end stop after each stanza, which shows the evolution and the continuation of something, although there is difference because the stanzas separate the ideas. In the first stanza, the first separation of ideas is through the enjambment after the word air. This separates the direct relation to hearing from the indirect, because in the first line it says the birth of listening in the late Jurassic. This shows that very long ago, which is the late Jurassic, which was a period during the dinosaurs, there was a birth of listening, and it was a mystery, as stated in the first line. The mystery of feather is the birth of listening in the late Jurassic. How out of the ordinary hearing came this quick, attention to the air, comma. This comma separates this line from how between those fine aspiring lizards in the wind there was this give. This shows the indirect relation to hearing through the symbol of lizards, as well as relation back to the Jurassics, as lizards were put on the earth to spread the message of God, relation back to listening. The birth of listening is where everything was essential. It shows the communication on a spiritual level, relating back to lizards as they were considered holy and divine and put on earth by God. The birth of listening in the late Jurassic. This line is very important as it establishes where all the hearing started, and therefore the theme of evolution throughout this poem. Listening is an essential characteristic for humans and is a way people communicate, and therefore, in the phrase, how between those fine aspiring lizards in the wind was this give, that thickening of nothings into the lift. Therefore, it's saying that hearing wasn't expected through the words came this quick, and how it became attention to nothingness, how hearing developed so quickly that people couldn't change it, and how between those fine aspiring lizards, how between finite but apparent lizards, how between fine and aspiring things, between people that tried to spread the message, tried to develop it, there was this wind, there was this sort of calling, this sort of breeze, there was this give and give. People were trying to give more to hearing, trying to enhance it, but since it was such an established habit, with people, there was this thickening of nothings. Everything that was developed was demolished. And used through the word that, instead of saying this, the author chose that making the people put in past tense. This shows that it has been tried and failed. And with the use of words nothings, it relates back to air, showing repetition of evolution, and how because of this repetition, nothing was happened, which led into the mystery, the last word, the last stanza. Because of after the word mystery there is no end stop, the continuation of the line happens in the second stanza. This shows the evolution of the idea, although with a different meaning, different structure, as the line is carried on a different stanza. Interestingly enough, the word feather is repeated in the second stanza as in the first stanza, and is the title. After doing some research and looking in the symbolism dictionary, I figured out that feather are from birds, and they provide a barrier between it and the outside world. It also defines how attractive a bird is, and from my interpretation and my experiences, feathers are often found by other people when they fall off because they drift in the wind, relation to the wind in the first stanza, because people either pick them up for their beauty or leave them because they are dirty. This symbolizes communication at a spiritual level. The feathers are the womb of this song, meaning that the feather is where it all started. It's the wind, the nothingness of listening. And because the womb is where life starts and starts happening, the line is saying that the feather, or listening, is the birth of the song. The womb is being metaphorically connected to listening, and the feather is being metaphorically connected to listening. Therefore, whenever you see repetition of feather, it is basically reinstating the habit of listening and how it has become diminishing. And relating back to my point of how people sometimes pick it up and sometimes don't, it shows how some people are trying to change it and some others aren't. In addition to this, besides the use of stanza, symbols are also used, as I mentioned before. First of all, the symbol of feather. The feather, as I mentioned before, is a spiritual communication at a deep level. And from my interpretation, People sometimes pick up a feather because of its beauty, or for example, if it's a pigeon feather, they leave it on the floor as it is often seen. This relates back to the fact that there is a lot of new habits being born, although not many are picked up because they're already developed. They are already they are already in use by so many people that there's nothing unique about them. Therefore, and another symbol is lizard. The lizards represent the God's figure on earth and are meant to communicate the ideologies of God on earth. This relates back to the word of late Jurassic and womb, as the womb is where it all started. Therefore, with the lizards and feathers being related in the womb, it shows that God's creation was to make everyone have the same habits, although because of the strict routine of scales it stirs, and shrugs its small shoulders, stretches its trapezoids, fingers its new curves. This shows that people are trying to change by stretching it out, shrugging its shoulders, and stretching its trapezoids. They're trying to stretch the English language, although it's constricted within the curves of the person. The final literary device that is used here is the repetition of words. For example, feather is repeated in every line. The structure of the poem without any end stop after each paragraph is connected. This directly relates to my thesis of how, through the repetition of habits, we become numb to how they have impacted us. The author is trying to show that after realizing that there is no end stop after the first poem, after the first stanza, we keep reading on and it becomes numb to us. Enjambment is also an example of this, where there is very little enjambment, and when there is, it's to separate ideas from it being indirect and direct. The only time that enjambment is really used is between separating the idea of hearing and touching. Because the mystery of the offender, because for example, in the third stanza, the repetition of the mystery of a feather is the same that is used as the first stanza. Basically, the author is starting a new poem for a new sense. The first two stanzas were about one of the essential senses of hearing. This poem, is to think of the infinity of hairs, like prehistoric Velcro zipping up to catch and hold and spill the wind in the mystery. This mystery of feather is used to start the new poem. And because the infinity, use of the word of infinity, shows that something never ends, it is ever repeated, meaning that the mystery of the feather is endless, and the true answer will never be found, such like the senses and why people cannot keep developing him. Again, a synonym for Jurassic is used, prehistoric, Velcro, zipping up, and catch and hold and spill the wind. Through the words catch and hold, the feather is trying to catch up. Basically, hearing is trying to catch up with all the other senses as they are developing, but hearing is not. Hearing and all the other senses are staying as normal habits, ones that are subconscious because people have become so numb to their addition to society and how they are subconscious, as I said before. How they sort of are habits that you don't really notice you do. They just happen. They spill the nothingness of the air. This is the subconscious action. They spill the wind and the mystery of the feather. They're the ones that you use to communicate and compete in essential life, although aren't noticed. They're not given enough recognition, which is the mystery of the feather, which is why in the birth of caress, which is touch, which is why in the birth of these with such care, with a definite touch of stroking gently and lovingly, with why the lizards carry this on, is so weird how, when my skin begins to bloom towards your fingers who are skimming, like sanderlings across my sand, the incredulous articulations of my back. This final stanza sums up how the repetition of habits is an evolution from being born into something that people praise to being subconscious and something people don't take notice of. It is the birth of caress, which is touch, but very gentle touch. It is be given with such preciseness that it gives an enlightening connotation, and it begins to skim. It becomes to skin your surface like sanderlings, which are birds that fly very close to the ocean but do not touch it. It shows that people are trying to skim the surface and use them, that the subconscious fact of habits are just skimming the surface, and people therefore cannot develop them. And this relates back to the word of back, the last word with an end stop. The end stop not only ends the poem, but with the word back, it symbolizes how all the habits we have turned our back on. We have not taken notice of them and given enough credit to them as they deserve and how they have impacted our lives. and therefore we cannot enhance them or alter them to suit our own needs. Thank you.